Hey guys, another video for our How to Do Stuff in Japan playlist and our mini series on being married to a Japanese person. Today's topic is being a wife in Japan. So if you are to marry a Japanese person and to live in Japan, or live anywhere else probably, doesn't really matter where you live probably, what the relationship is likely to be. And again, these how-to videos are all generalizations and not always the case, but they generally are the case. So there's a fairly good chance that if you were to marry a Japanese person, that this is likely to be what the experience would be. Just because the majority of people here tend to live sort of similarly to each other. It's a very homogenous society, and most of the people here tend to live in a similar way to each other. Not always, of course, there's always exceptions, and some people are very, very different to what we describe. But generally, when you live here and you have family here and friends here and you spend time with people here, you find that most of these things are true. So if you marry a Japanese guy and you're a Japanese wife, or a wife of a Japanese guy, what you might expect. So first of all, probably what he will expect of you is probably a good place to start. Many of you would probably recognize the type of relationship as being what it might have been like in some other countries back in the 50s. So it's really quite common to see families here, family dynamics here that are very similar to what they were in other countries, in some other countries in the 50s. So the classic husband goes to work, the wife stays at home and looks after the house, cooks the dinner and cleans the house and looks after the kids. It's a lot of it's like that. A lot of it's like that. We have a friend of ours from Australia who comes here every year to visit us, and she's made that comment a few times. Different things that she's seen here that we've pointed out to her. You know, did you notice this? Did you notice this? And her comment often is that it reminds her of what it was like in Australia in the 50s. And the relationships in the 50s, so it's very common. So it's sort of considered to be normal. And again, because Japan is homogenous and most of the people here have grown up seeing this as normal, so the average lady in Japan, or the average girl in Japan, grows up seeing her friends and family and neighbors and everybody around her, where the good wife looks after the house, and the good wife, you know, wears the apron and cleans the kitchen and cooks dinner and often cooks 3 meals a day. I mean, quite often people here do have cooked breakfasts and cooked lunches and cooked dinners. So quite commonly, housewives here, wives here will cook 3 meals a day. Of course, there are some husbands here who do cook, but it's not normally the case. Usually the case is that the kitchen and the house is the wife's domain, and that's her responsibility to make sure the food is cooked. And we've seen some classic examples in real life and on TV of this depicted in Japan, and it still really is that 50s thing with the apron. You'll actually see older ladies here go shopping in the supermarket wearing an apron quite often. It's sort of like Japanese people sort of like uniforms. We've talked about this before. Whatever your role is in life, you know, you'll sort of wear the appropriate uniform. You know, the salary man wears his black suit, and the school kids wear their school uniforms, and everybody sort of has their uniform, you know. And it's quite common to see older ladies in the supermarkets or just walking down the street in aprons, wearing an apron. It's quite commh. And a friend of ours joked once that they're on a mission, and it's sort of partly true. It's like, if the older lady's wearing the apron and she's going shopping, it's showing that, you know, she's working, sort of thing. That's her job. That's her task, is to go and do the grocery shopping. So she's got her apron on and she's grocery shopping. So keep in mind that the average Japanese husband here has grown up seeing this. That's what his mother does. That's what his aunt does. That's what his grandmother did. That's what the lady next door does. All the women in his life, all the married ladies in his life, have probably done that, you know, and that's their thing, is to stay at home, look after the house and make sure that the house is clean and make sure the food's cooked and everything's just right. And and ladies here do tend to take responsibility. If we tend not to visit people's houses here very much, but with family members and so on, we obviously do. And the wives usually feel a lot of responsibility when you go visiting to make sure that everything's right, the food's right, the house is clean and tidy, and everything's perfect. The kids are perfect. That's the other thing. Usually the wives are responsible for most of the kids stuff, kids activities and all the kids related stuff. Usually it's the mothers that take care of it all and make sure the kids are where they're supposed to be and everything else. So of course there are some ladies here who are married and who have kids and also have a job, sometimes part-time job, most often a part-time job, but some ladies will still have a career or a full-time job as well. But even with that, they still feel obliged to be responsible for the house, because it's sort of like it's their number one responsibility is to look after the house. So if they neglect that, the fact that they've got a job is sort of irrelevant. If they neglect the house duties, and don't make sure that there's a meal cooked every day. Again, I don't like to talk about my own family sort of situation at all, but I've had apologies before because my wife was busy all day and she didn't have time to cook dinner, and so she stopped and got something on the way home, and she'll be apologetic for that. And it doesn't matter how much I say, it doesn't matter, geez, you had a busy day, it doesn't matter, I can get something. She still feels it's her responsibility. So, and this is the thing, it's so deeply ingrained, it doesn't matter what you say. And see, this is the thing, so there might be some ladies watching this thinking, if I marry a Japanese husband, I won't be putting up with that shit. Well, yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Because he will expect you to. Usually, this is what he'll expect, is because this is what he sees as being normal. This is what he's always seen as normal as he's grown up, and everybody around him has seen this as normal, and this is normal. So, if you're comfortable with that this is the first part. If you're comfortable with that, then that's good, because if you're not comfortable with that, it's going to be very difficult, because he'll expect it. I've seen some shocking stuff, again, in real life and also on TV. There's a show that keeps coming into my mind where it was sort of like a reality TV show, and they're just following these people around, and the guys come home from work and sat down on the lounge room floor and started watching TV, and the wife came out and put the dinner down on the table, and he's picked it up, taken one mouthful and said, it's cold, send it, do something about it, it's cold. And she's come running out from the kitchen and grabbed it and taken it back into the kitchen again to sort it out, to fix it, sort of thing. And it was like, and the Japanese TV, that was considered to be perfectly normal. There was no sort of reaction to that. That wasn't the main point of the story or anything. That was just a normal little thing that happened. So there's a lot of that. So it doesn't matter what else the lady has going on in her life, you'll be expected to be responsible for all the house stuff and all the kids stuff, and that's your number one responsibility, to make sure everything's going perfectly. And if it's not, there's a good chance that he'll complain to you. So that's the first part of the situation. The second part is that in Japanese society, in some societies, family come first, and then work, and then something else and something else, or relationships, and then something else and something else. For men in Japan, usually work comes first. And again, this is society's expectation. So his employer and his co-workers and he himself will expect that his work will come first. So that what that means is that he will be obliged to spend as much time at work as is expected to. So he'll probably leave early in the morning, come home late in the afternoon, depending on what sort of work he does. But and that will come first all the time. So that will mean that he'll be coming home late. And if the boss says to him at 5 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock at night, the boss says, right, we're going to the izakaya to go drinking, or we're going to the snack. If you get a male-dominated workplace, as they often are, the boss will just say, we're going to the snack. And for those of you who don't know, snack's sort of like a bar that you go to where there's girls who sit and flirt with you and carry on, sort of like an escort without the sex sort of thing, but quite common for business guys to go to izakaya, to go to restaurants or to go to snack or to go to bars or whatever after work with all the co-workers, the male co-workers, and stay there until the boss goes home. So they might go there at 7 or 8 o'clock at night and be there till 11, 12, whenever the boss sort of leaves, and then it's okay to go home. And he might do that because he wants to do that, or he might do that because he's obliged to do that. But either way, that's perfectly normal here. And complaining about it or questioning about it or giving him any sort of grief about that at all is not going to go down very well at all, because he's probably obliged to do it. But even if he's not obliged, even if he's doing it by choice, then it's still perfectly normal. And this is the thing with relationships. If you have a relationship with a Japanese person, now this is the case whether you live in Japan or live somewhere else, because their expectations of a relationship won't change just because they're living in your country. But particularly if you're living in Japan, the whole society will be saying that his behaviour is perfectly normal. And if you react to that at all, no one's going to give you any sympathy, or they're going to think you're not doing your part of the deal because you're not accepting the way it is, and that you're giving him grief about something that can't be helped. They're going to say, shogunai, it can't be helped, shogunai, it's just the way it is. So, and then that can be at the last moment too. So you could well have a plan. You could have a plan for Saturday. Okay, Saturday, you've been, knocking yourself out all week looking after the house and the kids and making sure everything's perfect. And even if you don't have kids too, by the way, we know lots of people who are married that don't have kids yet, and it's still the same expectation on the wife to look after the house. So you might have knocked yourself out all week looking after the house, and the plan is on Saturday you're going out to lunch somewhere and then going off to do something else, and it might be something really, really important to you that you really, really think is important, and then he might come home Friday night and say, boss says I've got to work tomorrow. End of story. That's it, end of story. He's got to work, and you've got to go, oh well, okay, shogunai, can't be helped. Or he might say the boss said we're going to lunch. The boss wants him to go to lunch somewhere, or the boss wants him to do something, or they're going to go off for a trip somewhere. They do actually do business, sort of co-worker type trips here, where they go off with all their co-workers somewhere for the day or for the weekend or something. And that can happen at the last moment. The boss just says you've got to do this tomorrow, and he'll just tell you, oh sorry, I can't do that tomorrow. In some countries, of course, he could say to the boss, oh look boss, really I've got this thing with the wife tomorrow and I really have to do it, because it's really important to her and I really want to do it. And in some countries the boss would understand that too and say, oh okay, no problem, that's all right, we'll do this another day, or we'll get by without you or something. Whereas in Japan it just wouldn't happen. He can't say that to the boss because people don't do that here. You don't put your family before your job in Japan. You just don't, and nobody would support that. So the guy, even if your husband wanted to, even if the Japanese husband wanted to say that to the boss, he can't, because if he does, the boss is going to go, well, that's not good enough. You have to be there, and it could be the end of his career, end of his job. It really could, stuff like that. Putting something else before work in Japan is just not on. It's just not on. So he really doesn't have that option. And then everybody else would see that that's normal as well. So you have to accept it, and just accept it without any complaint at all. And if you do complain to anybody or mention it to anybody or say you're not happy about it or something, you're not going to get any sympathy. They're going to look at you as if you're not being reasonable. You're being unreasonable again. It's his job, and that's what they'll say. And we've talked about this in other videos before. People don't. A lot of foreigners will leave comments on the videos, or people watch our videos and leave comments, or people visit us here and will say, but can't he understand that's not the way you see it, and won't he understand this, and why can't you do this, and why can't you tell him this, and why can't you tell him that? Well, it's just the way it is. It's just the way it is, and it's not going to change. You're not going to change it, It's just the way it is. You just have to accept it. You just have to accept it. So So there's the two expectations. There's the expectation on you if you're the wife of a Japanese person. The expectation is on you that you have to put, you know, the house and the kids and him, and, you know, looking after the domestic duties and the cooking and the cleaning and everything else. You have to put that before everything else. Whatever else you've got going on, that stuff has to come first. All that domestic stuff has to come first, and he's going to put his work thing first. And you can see that's the dynamic that works for people in Japan, because that you can sort of see that there's a sort of a logic to that he's looking after the work side of things and you're looking after the house side of things. So to a lot of people in Japan, that just seems like the normal, rational way to do it, as it did in a lot of other countries back in the 50s. You know, that was sort of seen as normal. So everybody here sees that as normal. So if you try and rock the boat and say, no, that's not normal, I don't want to do that, you know, I don't want to be responsible for the house, I want him to share the house duties, and I want to have my own career and go and do my own thing, and you're really going to be up against it. You really, really are. And again, there are exceptions to this, and we know professional ladies in Japan that have totally different relationships with their husbands, and quite often too, don't want to misunderstand this either, there's this going on, but at the same time, it's very true that a lot of, in a lot of houses here, a lot of homes here, the ladies are the boss. And there's definitely that thing as well, that you will experience that if you spend time visiting people in Japan and hanging out in people's homes in Japan. You will notice that part of that running the household thing and looking after the house thing and doing the domestic thing is that usually the lady of the house is the lady of the house and is the boss, and she says what goes. She says what goes with the kids, and she says what goes with what actually goes on in the house. And that is quite often the case. The guy will just blend into the background in the house and quite often not play a very big part in what's going on at all. Quite often they'll just sit around and again, like the 50s in some other countries, sit around and just watch sport on TV, and the wife will just sort of control what's going on and make sure the kids are where they've got to be and all that sort of thing. So you're sort of getting the idea, aren't you, what it's like? So that's sort of going to be what it's like. Chances are you marry a Japanese guy, that's a pretty good chance of what it's going to be like for you. And again, if you do try and buck the system or try and make it go another way, there's a pretty good chance it's not going to end well. That's usually where they break down. Is that, you know, it's just this is why the very first video we made, what's this, number 5 on this topic, and the first one we made on this topic, that was sort of what we're saying, wasn't it? Don't do it. And this is sort of why, and this is why the majority of these marriages between Japanese people and non-Japanese people just don't work, because you're both going in with totally different expectations. Usually the foreigner's going in with a totally different expectation of what's fair to expect of them, and then a totally different expectation of what it's fair to expect of the partner. And the Japanese person's just got a totally different set of expectations altogether, and you're both going in from that point of view. And, you know, although on occasion it can be worked out, you can work it out, more often than not you can't, and more often than not it fails and it ends badly, and then it's, you know, it's sad and it's messed up, and, you know, that's usually how it ends. There's a pretty good chance, you know, that if you marry a Japanese person, there's a pretty good chance it's going to end badly. So I mean, for these videos, you know, sorry if they're not as positive, and we know videos like this aren't terribly popular because people don't like hearing things like this, because it doesn't fit in with some people's idea of what they'd like it to be, you know. So, but we feel that with all our videos, all we're trying to do is just say what we see, and this is what we see. This is what we see. The majority of relationships between Japanese people and foreigners fail, and the reason they fail is the things we're talking about in these videos. So if you do ignore what we've said and do marry a Japanese person, then at least these videos have given you a bit of a heads up about what's normal. And that's the thing, if you are married to a Japanese person, this is what you constantly have to remind yourself, that for them this is normal. For them this is normal. So what tends to happen is that you tend to, because you're two individuals, you tend to look at each other's behaviour as being that individual's behaviour, And sometimes that's the case, but more often it's not the individual's behaviour, it's that culture. And you have to look at what's happening, what they're doing. You know, if he's saying to you, why haven't you cooked dinner? You know, you're going to have to remind yourself that he's not just being an arsehole, it's just that in his culture, that's normal. That if he comes home at 7 o'clock at night after a big day at work, he's going to expect that dinner's ready for him. And if there's no dinner ready for him, he's going to be saying to you, what the hell's going on, where's my dinner? Because in Japanese culture, that's perfectly normal. You haven't done your part of the normal behaviour. So, you know, you just have to accept that that's the cultural difference, and as far as he's concerned and Japanese people are concerned, his expectation is quite reasonable, and you haven't done what you're supposed to have done, you know. So anyway, hopefully that's of some use in some small way to somebody. whatever you take from that, hopefully it's of some use to somebody, at least one person anyway. More videos coming soon.